Life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it. And for John, a successful but lonely man, those surprises come in the form of two small children with familiar faces and a love he never anticipated. When John meets Anna, a kind yet guarded woman struggling to raise her children alone, he learns that her kids are more than strangers. They are, in fact, his own, brought into the world through a decision he made years ago. Shocked and uncertain, John must confront his past and grapple with the responsibility of fatherhood thrust upon him. In this touching tale of unexpected family and second chances, John's journey takes him from anger and disbelief to acceptance and love. As he finds himself drawn deeper into the lives of Anna, Leo, and Mia, he discovers that family is more than blood. It's a commitment, a choice, and a source of joy he never knew he needed. Together, they face society's judgments and their own fears, learning to embrace a life built on resilience, forgiveness, and the unbreakable bonds they've created. Join John, Anna, Leo, and Mia on a heartwarming journey that reminds us that family is found in the most unexpected places. As their love deepens, they show us that the greatest gifts in life come not from perfection, but from the courage to open our hearts to the unknown. For those who believe in the power of love and the beauty of new beginnings, this is a story that will stay with you long after the final page. The autumn air was crisp as John stepped out of his sleek black Mercedes, the weight of his workweek pressing down on his shoulders. He was accustomed to the quiet solitude of his life, a routine that involved little more than business deals, corporate dinners, and the occasional weekend retreat. A sense of detachment clung to him, a numbness he rarely acknowledged, but often felt in moments like these, when the evening settled in and he had nothing but silence to look forward to. As he walked down the bustling street toward his favorite cafe, he was jolted from his thoughts by the laughter of children. He watched as two young kids, a boy and a girl, perhaps around 5 or 6 years old, ran past him, their mother trailing behind, her hands full with grocery bags. There was something in the way the children moved, an energy and innocence that made him pause. The boy looked up, his eyes locking onto John's with a startling familiarity. John's heart skipped, a strange déjà vu creeping into his thoughts. "Excuse me, sir," the woman said, noticing that her children had taken an interest in him. Her voice was soft, a little hesitant, with a warmth that caught John off guard. "Oh, no trouble at all," John replied, his voice steady, though his mind was racing. He could not shake the feeling that something about these children felt eerily familiar. But he brushed the thought aside. After all, he had never met this woman or her children before. He offered a polite nod and continued on his way. Yet as he sipped his coffee later, he found himself glancing toward the entrance of the cafe, half hoping they would walk in. And when they did, he watched as the little family settled at a table near the window. The mother looked tired, her clothes modest, but her smile as she spoke to her children was one of pure love. John felt a pang in his chest, a feeling of longing that he didn't quite understand. The boy and girl giggled, sharing secrets only siblings could understand, and he couldn't help but notice the resemblance they bore to himself. He scrutinized the boy's features, the sharp nose, the slight dimple on his chin, even the dark hair that lay tousled on his head, and a strange thought began to form. Curiosity got the better of him. He casually walked over and introduced himself, finding an excuse to engage the mother in polite conversation. "It's rare to see such well-behaved kids these days," he remarked, nodding toward her children. "You're very lucky." She offered a tired smile, but her pride was evident. "Thank you. They're my world. I'd do anything for them." There was a sadness behind her words, one that didn't go unnoticed by John. As they spoke, John asked her name. "Anna," she replied, shifting uncomfortably under his gaze. "I'm sorry if we're disturbing your evening." "No, not at all," John reassured her, but his curiosity was growing, unchecked. I couldn't help but notice that your son, he looks a bit like me." He laughed awkwardly, trying to play off the strangeness of his own observation. Anna's face went pale, and her eyes darted away. There was a silence between them, tense and charged, before she cleared her throat. "Sometimes life brings surprises we don't expect," she murmured, glancing at her children as if guarding a secret. John's heart raced. He could tell there was something she wasn't saying, something important that he was only just beginning to grasp. Before he could press further, Anna gathered her children and excused herself. We should be going. It was nice meeting you, John." As they left, John felt a sense of unfinished business, a nagging thought that there was more to this story than a passing resemblance. And in the days that followed, he couldn't get them out of his mind. The children's faces haunted him, their laughter echoing in his thoughts. What if? It was a question he wasn't prepared to answer, yet it refused to leave him. He knew he had to find out more, and so he made a decision that would lead him on a path he could never have anticipated. The following week was one of restless nights and endless questions. John couldn't focus on work, his usual meticulous attention fraying with each passing day. He found himself replaying the brief encounter with Anna and her children, examining every word, every glance, looking for clues that might explain the unsettling familiarity he felt. On a quiet Tuesday morning, John found himself reaching out to a private investigator he had used in the past for business matters. It felt excessive, almost intrusive, but he was a man used to having control, and right now, his life felt anything but controlled. "I need you to find out everything you can about a woman named Anna," he told the investigator over the phone, providing her description and the name of the cafe where he had met her. I have reason to believe there's more to her story than meets the eye." He hesitated, wondering if he was making a mistake, but he couldn't back out now. The seed of curiosity had grown too deep, entwining itself with something deeper, something he didn't yet have the words for. Within days, he received a report, along with a few photos of Anna and her children, living their modest life in a small apartment on the outskirts of the city. But one part of the report stood out, and John found himself reading it over and over again, disbelief turning his thoughts into a whirlwind. The children's birth records listed father unknown, but there was a mention of a fertility clinic Anna had visited years ago. A realization dawned on him, his mind racing back to a decision he'd made in his early 30s, in a moment of impulsive generosity. He had once donated to a sperm bank, half as a favor to a doctor friend and half as a strange curiosity to leave behind a part of himself. He had almost forgotten about it, never really believing it would lead to anything real. But now, everything was falling into place, and with each puzzle piece, his heartbeat quickened. John confronted the clinic. He demanded answers, not willing to let another day pass without understanding how his past had crossed with Anna's in such a life-altering way. At first, the clinic resisted, citing confidentiality. But when he made it clear that he wouldn't back down, they confirmed his fears. "Yes, Mr. Brooks," a somber voice on the other end of the phone eventually admitted. "Your donation was used to help Ms. Anna Mayer conceive her children. She requested an anonymous donor, and all records were kept private, as is standard procedure." He hung up, numb. All this time, he had lived his life in isolation, distancing himself from anything that might demand too much of him emotionally. And now, without his knowledge or consent, he had become a father. 2 children bore his DNA, 2 lives he had unintentionally helped bring into the world. For hours, he sat in his empty apartment, grappling with the weight of this revelation. His mind flickered between anger and disbelief, hurt and confusion. He had no control over this, no say in the matter. And yet, he couldn't deny the undeniable link between him and those children, a bond he had never asked for but couldn't ignore. In the following days, he found himself drawn back to the cafe, hoping he might see Anna and the children again. And one evening, as he stood by the window, he spotted them, just as he had hoped. The sight of them, laughing, happy, unaware of his inner turmoil, stirred something in him he hadn't felt in years. It was as if the life he had deliberately kept at bay was now rushing toward him with unstoppable force. He walked over to their table, his face ashen, his posture tense. Anna looked up, her smile fading as she recognized the determination in his eyes. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low but resolute. She nodded, sensing the gravity of his words, and motioned for her children to play in the nearby park, within her sight but out of earshot. "I know," John began, struggling to contain the storm brewing inside him. "I know about them, the clinic, everything." He paused, watching her face fall as she realized the secret she'd kept for so long had finally surfaced. Anna looked down, her hands trembling. "I'm so sorry, John. I never thought this day would come. I wanted to keep my children safe, to protect them. I never wanted them to grow up without knowing who their father was. But I also didn't think you'd ever find out, he finished for her, bitterness lacing his words. You didn't think I'd ever find out that I have 2 children? That there are 2 human beings walking this earth, carrying my blood, my very essence? Tears glistened in her eyes, and she took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. I did what I thought was best. I wanted children, but I didn't want to burden anyone. I thought maybe it was better this way. They could have a life without complications, without a father who might not want them. Her words cut through him, and for a moment, he was speechless. He had been many things in his life, ambitious, successful, even ruthless in business, but never a father. The idea of anyone considering him incapable of love, of being a parent, stung deeply. You don't get to decide that, he whispered, his voice strained. I should have had a choice. I should have known. They sat in silence, both absorbing the enormity of the situation. Finally, Anna spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. So, what now? John looked out at the children, their innocence oblivious to the turmoil that had erupted around them. He didn't have an answer, not yet. But as he watched them, something in his heart shifted. They were a part of him, whether he had wanted it or not. And the thought of turning his back on them, on Anna, felt like a betrayal of himself. I don't know, he admitted, his voice softer, tinged with vulnerability. But I want to know them. I want a chance to be their father. The days after his confrontation with Anna were a whirlwind of emotions for John. He felt as though his entire life had been pulled out from under him, replaced by a reality he hadn't chosen and certainly hadn't expected. He had always prided himself on being a man of control, but now, nothing seemed within his grasp. He spent his nights pacing through his sprawling penthouse, staring out over the glittering cityscape, questioning every decision he'd made that had led him to this moment. It was easier to pretend it was a nightmare, that he could wake up and return to his predictable, detached life. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw those 2 young faces staring back at him, their features bearing undeniable traces of his own. The anger he felt toward Anna lingered, simmering beneath the surface. She had made a life-altering decision for him, and no matter how much he tried to rationalize her choices, the bitterness persisted. He wasn't prepared for fatherhood, especially one thrust upon him without his consent. The very idea of being a father clashed with everything he thought he knew about himself. And yet, an equally strong feeling stirred within him, an unfamiliar yearning that gnawed at him whenever he imagined the children's lives without him. He had been alone for so long that he hadn't realized how hollow his life had become. The thought that he might have a chance to fill that emptiness, to build something real with these 2 innocent souls, both terrified and intrigued him. One evening, as he stood by the window nursing a glass of scotch, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Anna. Would you like to see the kids this weekend? His heart lurched. Seeing them again would mean facing the truth, acknowledging the connection he was so desperately trying to ignore. But something inside him, a small, persistent voice he hadn't heard before, urged him to say yes. Yes, he replied, the single word heavier than he could have imagined. The weekend arrived, and John found himself standing outside Anna's modest apartment, a knot of nerves tightening in his stomach. He hadn't felt this nervous in years, not since his early days in the business world, when he was still uncertain of his place in it. Now, the stakes felt infinitely higher, as if the outcome of this visit would shape the rest of his life. Anna greeted him at the door, her expression guarded yet hopeful. She led him into the small living room, where toys were scattered across the floor, and a faint scent of crayons and childhood lingered in the air. It was a world so different from his own sterile, perfectly curated life, yet it felt unexpectedly warm. The children were playing by the couch, their laughter filling the room. When they looked up and saw him, the boy's eyes widened with recognition, while his sister regarded him with a quiet curiosity. There was no formal introduction, no awkward explanation of who he was. Instead, John simply sat down, unsure of what to say or how to act. "Hi," he finally managed, feeling foolish for the simplicity of his words. The boy looked at him, his eyes bright with excitement. "Are you Mommy's friend?" John glanced at Anna, who gave a slight nod of encouragement. "Yes," he said slowly, his voice softer than he'd intended. I'm here to get to know you both." The children exchanged a glance, their faces lighting up with the innocent thrill of meeting someone new. The boy eagerly showed John his collection of toy cars, while the girl shyly offered him a coloring book, her small hands brushing against his as she handed it over. In those brief, unassuming moments, John felt something within him shift. For the first time, he wasn't thinking about his own anger or betrayal. He was simply present, caught up in the children's laughter and the simple joy they radiated. Anna watched from the doorway, her gaze softening as she saw the man who had once been a stranger starting to connect with her children. She knew he was struggling, that his presence here today was an act of courage as much as curiosity. As the afternoon wore on, the kids grew bolder, tugging at John's sleeves, showing him their drawings, and asking him endless questions. He felt himself softening, his walls crumbling with each small gesture of trust they extended. He found himself smiling, genuinely smiling, in a way he hadn't in years. Eventually, Anna brought out a tray of cookies, and they all gathered around the small coffee table, the children chattering happily as they devoured the treats. John observed them, his heart filled with a confusing mix of emotions. He could feel the initial shock beginning to fade, replaced by a deep-seated ache he couldn't yet name. When it was time to leave, the children clung to him, begging him to come back soon. The boy, with his wide, hopeful eyes, looked up at him and asked, "Will you be our friend too?" John's throat tightened. "Yes," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I'll come back." Outside, Anna walked him to his car, her face a mixture of relief and concern. "Thank you for coming, John," she said quietly. "I know this hasn't been easy." He nodded, feeling an unexpected surge of gratitude toward her. Despite everything, she had welcomed him into their lives, allowed him a chance to know his children. I'm still figuring this out," he admitted, his voice raw with vulnerability. "But I think I want to try." Anna smiled, her eyes glistening. That's all I could ever ask for. As he drove away, John's mind was a storm of thoughts, yet for the first time, he felt a strange sense of peace settling over him. He knew the road ahead would be challenging, filled with moments of doubt and frustration. But as he remembered the laughter of his children, the warmth of their small hands in his, he felt a glimmer of something he had long since forgotten: hope. The days after his first visit to Anna's apartment left John with a lingering sense of calm he hadn't felt in years. He replayed the moments he shared with the children, marveling at how such brief, simple interactions had managed to ease the tension he had carried within him. Yet, beneath the warmth, a tinge of uncertainty remained. He was stepping into uncharted territory, and the fear of failure haunted him. Determined to give his newfound role as a father a fair chance, John arranged another visit with Anna. This time, they agreed to meet at a local park, a place where the children could run free and enjoy themselves without the confines of walls. The idea of spending an entire afternoon with them was daunting, but he pushed his nerves aside, knowing that avoiding his fears wouldn't make them go away. As he arrived at the park, he spotted Anna sitting on a bench, watching her children as they played. She greeted him with a smile, one filled with gratitude and perhaps a hint of relief. She seemed to sense that John's presence wasn't something he took lightly, and the mutual respect between them grew with each encounter. The boy, whom John had learned was named Leo, saw him first. "John!" Leo shouted, running toward him with a grin that seemed to light up his entire face. John's heart swelled at the sound of his name, spoken with such excitement, and he kneeled to greet him, offering a gentle hug. The girl, Maya, followed, her shyness evident in the way she clutched a small stuffed rabbit, her constant companion. She looked up at him with wide, cautious eyes, and he offered her a smile, extending his hand in a small gesture of reassurance. "Would you like to play?" he asked, his tone soft. She hesitated, glancing at her brother for guidance, before nodding slowly. The three of them walked toward the playground, where Leo immediately challenged John to a race down the slides. It was a strange feeling, engaging in a carefree game he hadn't played since his own childhood, but as he slid down and heard the children's laughter, he felt a sense of joy he had long forgotten. As they played, Anna watched from a distance, her expression a mix of happiness and melancholy. John noticed her, and for a moment their eyes met, a silent understanding passing between them. She had raised these children alone, carried the weight of their lives on her shoulders, and now she was allowing him to share in that responsibility. He felt a wave of admiration for her resilience, though he knew she must have faced her own doubts and fears along the way. After an hour of play, the children grew tired and settled onto the grass, where they started showing John their treasures: small pebbles, leaves, and bits of nature they had collected from their surroundings. John listened, captivated by the way they saw the world, every small detail infused with wonder and curiosity. He felt himself relaxing, the apprehension he'd carried melting away under their innocent chatter. "Did you know," Leo said proudly, "that this rock is 1,000,000 years old? Maybe even older." John smiled, feigning amazement. 1,000,000 years? That's incredible. Mia, encouraged by her brother's boldness, held up a feather she had found. "And this? It's from a bird who flew all the way from another country." John's heart softened as he watched her, and he nodded solemnly. "That's a very special feather. You must have a great eye to find it." As the afternoon wore on, John felt the tension between himself and the children slowly dissipate. Each small exchange, each shared smile, bridged the gap between them, building a fragile yet undeniable connection. They didn't know him as Dad yet. Perhaps they never would. But the bond between them felt real, something he hadn't anticipated, but now couldn't imagine his life without. When it was time to leave, Leo and Mia clung to him, begging him to stay longer. John knelt down, looking them both in the eyes. "I promise I'll come back," he assured them, his voice steady. "We'll have more days like this." Anna joined them, placing a gentle hand on each child's shoulder. "Come on, kids, say goodbye to John. He'll be back soon." As John stood, he met Anna's gaze. There was a vulnerability in her eyes, one that mirrored his own. They walked a short distance together as the children ran ahead, giving them a moment of privacy. "I didn't expect this to feel so natural," John admitted, glancing down, his voice almost a whisper. Anna nodded, her own emotions close to the surface. "You're doing well, John. Better than I ever imagined." He swallowed, the weight of her words settling on him. "I'm trying," he said. I'm scared I'll mess it up, that I'll let them down." She placed a reassuring hand on his arm, her touch warm and grounding. "We all have those fears. But you're here, and that's already more than I ever expected. Give yourself some grace." He looked at her, gratitude flooding him. In the short time he had known her, Anna had come to embody qualities he respected deeply: strength, compassion, resilience. There was an unspoken understanding between them now, a shared history, however unconventional, that had brought them together in ways neither had foreseen. As they said their final goodbyes, John's heart felt heavy yet hopeful. Driving home, he found himself envisioning a life that felt both foreign and achingly familiar. A life with Leo and Mia, a life with Anna by his side. He didn't yet know if he was ready for such a future, but he was beginning to understand that some things, some people, were worth the risk. For the first time in years, John felt a glimmer of excitement for what lay ahead, a tentative step toward a future he hadn't planned but was starting to embrace. As John's visits with Leo and Mia became more frequent, a rhythm began to form, a tentative yet growing sense of family. Each time he saw them, he noticed more of himself in their smiles, in the way Leo's curiosity mirrored his own as a boy, or how Mia's quiet resilience reminded him of his late mother. Yet amid the joy of discovering these connections, there remained a lingering curiosity about Anna's life before him, about the story that had led her to raise his children on her own. One afternoon, after a day spent with the kids at a local science museum, John lingered behind as Anna gathered their things. He could tell there was a story she hadn't yet shared, something that had weighed on her for years, and he knew it was time to ask. Would you mind telling me more about how it all happened?" he asked carefully, his tone gentle but direct. "I know it's not my place to pry, but I'd like to understand everything." Anna glanced at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of apprehension and resolve. She nodded slowly. "I think it's time you knew." Later that evening, after putting Leo and Mia to bed, Anna invited John to stay, offering him a mug of tea as they settled into the small, cozy living room. The soft glow of a single lamp cast warm shadows around them, creating an intimate, quiet space where secrets could finally be spoken. I never planned on being a single mother, Anna began, her voice tinged with a sadness that made John's heart ache. Growing up, I imagined I'd find someone, have a family the traditional way, and give my children everything I didn't have. She paused, searching for the right words. But life doesn't always follow our plans, does it? John nodded, his eyes fixed on her, silently encouraging her to continue. When I was younger, I was in a long-term relationship, she said, a faint, wistful smile crossing her face. I thought he was the one, that we'd have a future together. But as time went on, I realized we were on completely different paths. He didn't want children. He didn't want the kind of life I dreamed of. Eventually, we parted ways. She took a shaky breath, her fingers tracing the rim of her mug. I spent years focusing on myself, building a career, creating a life I could be proud of. But that dream of a family, of having children, it never left me. When I was in my early 30s, I felt that familiar ache, the longing for a family. I knew time was slipping away, and I was tired of waiting for someone to fulfill that dream with me. John felt a pang of empathy for her. He, too, had put his life on hold, though for different reasons. But he could understand the feeling of chasing an elusive future, of wanting something more than what life had handed him. "So you chose," he began, his voice soft, not quite able to finish the sentence. "Yes," she replied, looking him in the eye. "I chose to have children on my own. I researched fertility clinics, weighed my options, and ultimately decided that using an anonymous donor would be the best choice. It seemed simple enough at the time, just a way to bring my children into the world without the complications of a relationship." She paused, her gaze dropping to her hands, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I never thought I'd actually meet you, their father. I didn't think it would matter." John absorbed her words, feeling the weight of her decision, the complexity of her journey. He realized that, in her own way, she had made a sacrifice as profound as his own, choosing to build a family even when the odds seemed stacked against her. "Anna," he began, his voice thick with emotion, "I can't imagine what it must have been like, raising them on your own. You've done something incredible. I don't know if I would have had the courage to do what you did." She looked up, surprised, a flicker of relief in her eyes. "It wasn't easy," she admitted, a slight tremor in her voice. "There were days I felt I was failing them, days when I worried that I couldn't give them enough. But then, I'd see them smile, hear them laugh, and it made everything worth it." For a moment, silence settled between them, filled with an unspoken understanding. They were two people who had taken vastly different paths, but now found themselves bound by something larger than either could have foreseen. John cleared his throat, choosing his words carefully. "I was angry at first," he confessed, surprising himself with his own honesty. "Finding out like this, it wasn't easy for me either. I felt robbed of the choice, the chance to know them from the beginning." Anna's face softened, and she nodded, understanding his pain. "I'm sorry, John. If I could have done things differently, I would. I didn't intend to keep them from you. I thought that was what you would have wanted." He looked at her, his gaze intense yet filled with a new sense of acceptance. "Maybe a part of me did once. But now, I realize that they're here, and they're a part of my life whether I planned it or not. And for that, I'm grateful." Anna's eyes filled with tears, and she reached out, her hand brushing against his. The touch was brief, tentative, but it conveyed a depth of feeling words could not. They sat in silence, absorbing the magnitude of what had been shared. John knew there would be challenges ahead, moments of doubt and struggle, but he also knew that he was no longer alone on this journey. Together, they had formed an unexpected partnership, a foundation upon which they could build something beautiful for themselves and for their children. As the night wore on, John finally rose to leave, feeling an unfamiliar sense of peace. At the door, he paused, glancing back at Anna, his voice quiet but firm. "I want to be there for them, Anna," he said. "I want to be there for all of you." She smiled, her face illuminated by a glimmer of hope. "Then let's take it one day at a time," she replied. "We'll figure it out together." With a nod, he turned and left, the weight of the past replaced by a newfound purpose. For the first time in years, John felt that his life was moving forward, towards something real, something lasting. As he walked away, he couldn't help but imagine a future filled with family dinners, shared laughter, and the gentle warmth of love, things he had long thought beyond his reach. And for the first time in his life, he dared to believe that such a future was possible. The weeks that followed were a mix of joy, confusion, and a few moments of chaos as John adjusted to his new role in the lives of Anna and the children. He was learning to embrace his title as Dad, though it felt foreign and weighty on his tongue. With each visit, each shared meal, and each bedtime story, John found himself growing closer to Leo and Mia, discovering the quirks and qualities that made them unique, and finding parts of himself within them. But as he and Anna worked to establish a routine, it quickly became clear that their transition into a co-parenting partnership would not be seamless. John was used to the certainty and control he wielded in the business world, where he could dictate the course of events with a single decision. But in the realm of family, especially one so freshly formed, he found himself confronting a level of unpredictability he hadn't prepared for. One Sunday afternoon, John had arranged to take Leo and Mia to the zoo. He had planned everything meticulously, wanting the day to be perfect. But as they were getting ready, Leo suddenly became upset, clinging to Anna and refusing to let go. He buried his face in her sweater, his small frame trembling with emotion. John watched, feeling a pang of frustration mixed with concern. "Leo, don't you want to see the animals? You were so excited about it yesterday," he said, trying to keep his tone gentle. Leo shook his head, his voice muffled. "I don't want to go," he whispered, clutching his mother even tighter. Anna knelt beside him, stroking his back soothingly. "What's wrong, sweetheart? You love the zoo." The boy sniffled, glancing up at John before murmuring, What if you leave and never come back?" John's heart tightened, a cold realization dawning on him. He knelt down, placing a hand on Leo's shoulder. "Leo, I'm not going anywhere. I'm here to stay," he said, his voice soft but steady. "I promise, buddy. I'll always come back." Leo looked at him, his eyes searching John's face for the truth. After a long moment, he gave a reluctant nod, wiping his tears away with the back of his hand. John felt a mix of relief and sadness. He hadn't realized just how deeply his sudden presence, and the changes it brought, might unsettle the children. The zoo visit went smoothly after that, with Leo's initial fears easing into excitement as he marveled at the lions and laughed at the antics of the playful monkeys. But John couldn't shake the lingering guilt, the awareness that his presence brought both joy and confusion into their young lives. As they headed back, Mia, quiet for most of the trip, took his hand and asked in her small voice, "Will you be here tomorrow too?" John squeezed her hand, his voice catching in his throat. "Yes, Mia. I'll be here for as many tomorrows as you need." Later, when he and Anna were alone, John confided in her about his struggle with the children's reactions, his fear of not living up to their expectations. "I didn't realize how much my coming into their lives would shake things up," he admitted, his voice tinged with regret. "I just want them to feel safe. I don't want them to think I'll disappear." Anna's face softened as she listened, her own empathy evident in her gaze. "John, you're doing the best you can. They're just adjusting, and so are you. This isn't easy for any of us, but you're here. You're showing up. That's what matters most." He nodded, grateful for her reassurance, yet still plagued by self-doubt. His desire to be a dependable father clashed with his own lingering uncertainties, his lack of experience making every decision feel like a test he might fail. In the weeks that followed, he continued to show up, bit by bit, learning what it meant to be there for his children. There were small victories. A drawing Leo made of the three of them holding hands, Mia falling asleep on his shoulder during movie night, that helped anchor him. Moments that reminded him why he was here, why he was trying. But there were also misunderstandings. One evening, John attempted to help Mia with her math homework, only to make her more confused, leading to tears that left him feeling inadequate. Another time, he tried to implement his own strict sense of routine, insisting on earlier bedtimes and quiet reading hours, which clashed with the relaxed rhythm Anna had created with the kids. "John," Anna said one evening, gently pulling him aside, "they need structure, but they also need flexibility. You can't run this household the way you run your business. Children need room to breathe, to feel safe." He sighed, rubbing his temples. "I'm sorry, Anna. I want everything to be perfect. I want them to know I care, that I'm serious about this." She placed a reassuring hand on his arm, her eyes warm with understanding. "You don't have to be perfect, John. They need to see you as you are, mistakes and all. That's how they'll know you're real, that you're here to stay." Her words struck a chord in him, a reminder that love wasn't about perfection. It was about presence, patience, and vulnerability. And as he spent more time with his children, he found himself softening, his old habits of control slowly giving way to a gentler, more flexible approach. One night, as he tucked Leo and Mia into bed, Leo looked up at him, his face lit by the faint glow of the bedside lamp. "Are you my real dad?" he asked, his voice filled with the innocent wonder of a child trying to make sense of the world. John knelt beside him, swallowing the lump in his throat. "Yes, Leo, I'm your real dad, and I'll always be here for you, no matter what." Leo smiled, a genuine, relieved smile that seemed to lift the weight from John's shoulders. Mia, sleepy-eyed, mumbled, "Good night, Daddy," as she curled up under her blanket. The words struck him like a bolt of lightning, filling him with a warmth that spread through his entire being. He had never imagined himself as a father, had never dared to hope for such a title. And yet here he was. Daddy! In the eyes of these children, who had come to mean everything to him. As he left their room, he felt a deep sense of peace settle over him. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges he couldn't yet foresee, but he was no longer alone in his journey. He had found something worth fighting for, something that grounded him in ways he hadn't thought possible. And as he looked back at Anna, standing by the door with a soft smile, he realized that, in a way, he had found his place in the world, a place he hadn't even known he was searching for. The rhythm of John's new life fell into place slowly, marked by weekends spent with Leo and Mia, weekday dinners with Anna, and unexpected moments that made him realize just how much his heart had opened. He was no longer the man who moved through life alone, shielded by the walls of his work and his own emotional detachment. Now, he was a father who woke up early to surprise his children with pancakes and spent late nights learning to braid Mia's hair or help Leo with his art projects. One Saturday afternoon, John decided to take Leo and Mia on a small adventure, a fishing trip at a quiet lake just outside the city. He'd spent the night before preparing sandwiches, packing extra sweaters, and loading the car with everything they'd need for a day outdoors. He wanted to share something from his own childhood with them, a memory of simpler times spent with his father by the water, waiting in companionable silence as they watched the ripples dance across the lake. When they arrived, Leo's eyes sparkled with excitement, while Mia clutched her stuffed rabbit, a little apprehensive about the water. John knelt beside her, offering her a warm smile. "It's just a big pond, Mia, and I'll be right here with you the whole time. We're going to have fun, I promise." Her face relaxed, and she took his hand as they walked toward the pier. Together, they set up their fishing rods, John patiently teaching them how to bait the hooks, his voice steady and encouraging. Leo watched closely, his small hands gripping the fishing rod with intense concentration, determined to catch the biggest fish ever. Hours passed in a happy blur of laughter and excitement. Leo caught a tiny fish and squealed in delight, proudly showing it to Mia, who clapped her hands with a mixture of admiration and amusement. The children's joy was contagious, filling John with a warmth he hadn't felt in years. For the first time, he felt the quiet contentment of a father simply enjoying his children's company, savoring each moment as they came. As they sat on the edge of the pier, their feet dangling over the water, Mia looked up at him, her face thoughtful. "Daddy, did you used to fish when you were little?" The word "daddy" still tugged at his heart, each time filling him with a mix of surprise and gratitude. He nodded, smiling down at her. "Yes, I did. My dad used to bring me to a lake just like this one. We'd sit out here for hours, waiting for a fish to bite. Sometimes we didn't catch anything, but it was more about spending time together than catching fish." Mia leaned her head against his arm, a small, contented smile on her face. "I like this," she whispered. "I like being here with you." Leo nodded enthusiastically, his face smudged with dirt, his cheeks flushed from the day's excitement. "Can we come back every weekend, Daddy?" he asked, his eyes bright with hope. John chuckled, ruffling Leo's hair. "Maybe not every weekend, but we'll definitely come back. This is our special place now." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, they packed up their things and made their way back to the car, tired but happy. Mia fell asleep almost instantly, her small hand resting in John's as she leaned against his shoulder, while Leo chattered away about all the different fish they might catch next time. John listened, his heart full as he realized how natural it felt, how right it felt, to be there with them, sharing in their dreams and plans. Back at Anna's apartment, they were greeted with the warm, comforting smell of homemade soup. Anna had stayed behind to prepare dinner, knowing the children would come home hungry and exhausted. As she ladled soup into bowls, she listened to Leo recount their fishing adventure, his voice animated as he described his big catch. "And Daddy said we'll go again," Leo exclaimed, grinning up at John with pure, unfiltered joy. "Next time, we're gonna catch the biggest fish ever." Anna smiled, her eyes meeting John's across the table, a silent acknowledgement of the bond that had grown between him and the children. She had watched, with both hope and trepidation, as John became more and more a part of their lives. And now, seeing the joy he brought to her children, the love he was able to share, she felt a deep sense of peace. After dinner, as the kids drifted off to bed, John found himself lingering in the living room with Anna. They spoke in low voices, sharing stories of their childhoods, their dreams for the future, and their hopes for the children. He realized that his life had become intertwined with hers in ways he hadn't anticipated, that the boundary between their worlds had faded until they had formed a new kind of family, a partnership based on trust, love, and shared responsibility. "Thank you," he said quietly, breaking a comfortable silence, "for letting me be part of this." Anna looked at him, her gaze soft and warm. "I should be the one thanking you. You've given them so much already, John. They're happier than I've ever seen them." A gentle smile crossed his face, and he reached out, taking her hand. "They've given me more than I ever could have imagined. I didn't know I needed this. I didn't know I needed them." They sat like that, hand in hand, as the evening drew to a close, a sense of peace settling over them. In that quiet moment, John realized that he was no longer just a man passing through their lives. He was here to stay, to build a life with them, a life full of love, laughter, and the steady rhythm of family. As the months rolled on, the fragile bonds between John, Anna, and the children grew stronger, woven together by shared moments, laughter, and even the occasional disagreement. They were no longer three separate lives hesitantly intersecting. They were beginning to feel like a family. With each passing day, John embraced his role more fully, discovering small rituals that brought him closer to Leo and Mia. On weekday mornings, he would surprise them with creative breakfasts, pancakes shaped like animals, or toast with smiley faces drawn in jam, which soon became a cherished part of their routine. Evenings were reserved for bedtime stories, with Leo's favorite adventure tales and Mia's requests for princess stories or stories of magical lands that he made up on the spot. The children, too, had adapted to having John in their lives, no longer needing to be reassured that he'd come back. Instead, they eagerly anticipated his visits, rushing to the door each time he arrived. Mia, usually shy around strangers, would race into his arms, her small face lighting up, while Leo would proudly show him his latest art project or recount a story from school. One Friday night, as they all gathered for a cozy dinner at Anna's apartment, Mia tugged at John's sleeve with a question that took him by surprise. "Daddy," she asked, her voice timid yet curious, "are you going to live with us one day?" John paused, momentarily taken aback, his eyes meeting Anna's across the table. They hadn't discussed it, hadn't yet addressed the possibility of merging their lives in such a tangible way. He glanced at Anna, who offered him a gentle, understanding smile, silently encouraging him to be honest. "I'd like that, Mia," he replied, choosing his words carefully. "If that's what you and Leo want, and if your mom is okay with it too." Mia's face brightened, her excitement barely contained. "Yes! Then you could read us stories every night, and we could go fishing every weekend." Leo chimed in, his face alight with excitement. "And you could help me build my model planes." "It'd be so cool, Daddy." John chuckled, his heart full, even as he looked to Anna for her reaction. Her expression was thoughtful, as if she too was considering the possibility. Later, after the children were tucked into bed, they sat together in the quiet of the living room, each lost in their own thoughts. "Did you mean it?" Anna asked, breaking the silence, her voice soft but steady. "About moving in?" John nodded, his heart racing as he considered the weight of his words. "Yes, I did. I think we're ready for this. I know it's a big step, but I can't imagine my life without them now, or without you." Anna's face softened, a mix of relief and affection in her gaze. "I feel the same way. I've been thinking about it, but I didn't want to push. I wanted you to come to this on your own." He took her hand, feeling the warmth of her touch. "We're in this together, Anna. I want to be here, every day. I want to be a father to them, and I want to be with you." They talked late into the night, sharing their dreams for the future, their hopes for Leo and Mia, and even their fears about what lay ahead. They both knew there would be challenges, adjustments, and sacrifices to make this transition work, but they were ready to face them together. Over the next few weeks, they began preparing for the move, a gradual merging of lives and spaces. John's once empty penthouse filled with the laughter and energy of children, their toys scattered across the floor, their drawings proudly displayed on the fridge. It was no longer a house, but a home, each corner filled with reminders of the family they were building. Leo and Mia adjusted seamlessly, delighted by the change. They took to calling John Daddy without hesitation, their voices filled with a love and trust that made every sacrifice worthwhile. Even the occasional disagreements over bedtime or schoolwork were reminders that they were a family, navigating the ups and downs of life together. One evening, as they sat around the dinner table, John felt a surge of gratitude. He looked at Anna, whose eyes sparkled with the joy of a life she hadn't planned but had wholeheartedly embraced. He looked at Leo, who was busy explaining the intricacies of his latest model plane, and at Mia, who was showing off a drawing she had made of all four of them holding hands under a bright sun. It was in these quiet, unremarkable moments, over shared meals, laughter, and bedtime stories, that John realized just how profoundly his life had changed. The emptiness he had once carried was gone, replaced by a love so deep it felt like he had been waiting for it his entire life. As they finished dinner and prepared for the evening, Leo asked a question that made everyone pause. "Daddy," he said, looking up at John with wide, innocent eyes, "do you think we'll always be together?" John looked at Anna, who smiled, giving him a nod. He leaned down, his voice gentle but firm. "Yes, Leo, we're a family, and families stick together, no matter what." Mia beamed, clapping her hands, while Leo nodded, satisfied with the answer. Anna placed her hand over John's, a silent promise that echoed his own, a commitment to this life they had created together, a life filled with love, resilience, and the promise of tomorrow. As they all gathered for their nightly bedtime routine, John felt a deep sense of peace, the knowledge that he was exactly where he was meant to be. They had come together in the most unexpected of ways, but what they had built was real, unbreakable, and worth every challenge. For the first time in his life, John knew he was home. The decision to live together had felt right, filling John's life with a warmth he hadn't known was possible. The laughter, the gentle chaos, and the love that Leo and Mia brought into his once quiet world were priceless. Yet as they stepped into this new chapter, he couldn't ignore the subtle stares, the quiet judgment that lingered in the eyes of those around them. Their family was unconventional, and as their lives intertwined more deeply, the outside world began to take notice. It began with whispers from neighbors, curious glances at the school gate, and lingering stares during family outings. John was no stranger to scrutiny. His life as a successful businessman had often placed him in the public eye. But now the attention felt different. It wasn't admiration or respect, it was a quiet skepticism, a questioning of how a single, wealthy man and a woman of modest means had come together with two young children. The questions were unspoken but palpable, and John knew that his presence in Anna's life didn't fit the comfortable mold people expected. One afternoon, as he picked up Leo and Mia from school, he overheard two mothers nearby, their voices carrying just enough for him to hear. "Isn't that the man who's suddenly become their father?" one of them whispered. "It's strange, don't you think?" The other woman nodded, casting a critical glance in John's direction. "You have to wonder if it's really for the children's sake. Men like him don't just settle down with anyone. John felt a flash of anger rise within him, a protective urge to defend his family against their narrow-minded assumptions. But he held back, knowing that reacting would only fuel their curiosity. Instead, he focused on Leo and Mia, smiling as they ran toward him with their usual exuberance, blissfully unaware of the whispers around them. As they walked to the car, Leo looked up at him, his face filled with the innocent curiosity only a child could possess. "Daddy, why were those ladies looking at us?" John's heart sank. He knelt down, meeting his son's gaze with a reassuring smile. "Sometimes people don't understand things that are different," he said gently. "But what matters is that we know who we are, right? We're a family, no matter what anyone else thinks." Leo seemed satisfied with the answer, nodding as he took Mia's hand and climbed into the car. But John couldn't shake the lingering sense of unease, the knowledge that their family was under scrutiny. He realized that if they were to thrive, they would need to face these challenges together, to stand strong against the judgments of a world that didn't always accept things it couldn't easily understand. That evening, he confided in Anna, sharing the frustration and hurt he'd felt when he overheard the women at the school. She listened, her expression a mix of empathy and sadness, clearly understanding his struggle. "It's not easy, is it?" she said softly. "People assume so much based on what they see. They don't know our story, and some of them may never accept it." He nodded, feeling a surge of gratitude for her understanding. "But I don't want Leo and Mia to feel different. I don't want them to ever doubt that they're loved, that they belong." Anna reached for his hand, her touch grounding him. "Then we'll show them that love doesn't fit into any one box. We'll teach them that family is about choice, about being there for each other no matter what. We can't control what others think, but we can control the love we give them." Over the following weeks, John and Anna began to face the world's gaze with renewed strength. They attended school events together, held hands at family gatherings, and stood proudly as a family, refusing to let the whispers define them. There were still moments of discomfort, times when judgmental looks lingered a bit too long, but they found strength in each other, in the resilience that came from knowing they were building something real. One weekend, they decided to host a small gathering, inviting close friends and neighbors, hoping to share their joy and, perhaps, ease the curiosity surrounding their family. Anna prepared a warm, welcoming spread, filling their home with the scent of fresh bread and laughter, creating an environment that was as inviting as it was honest. As friends and neighbors filled their home, John noticed the way people's expressions softened, their curiosity giving way to understanding as they witnessed the undeniable love and happiness that radiated from Leo and Mia. By the end of the evening, many of the guests had relaxed, their initial judgments replaced by genuine smiles and friendly conversations. One neighbor, an older woman named Mrs. Dawson, approached John as he stood by the doorway, watching Anna laugh with a friend in the living room. Mrs. Dawson had always been reserved, one of those who had looked at him with questioning eyes. But now her expression was kind, thoughtful. "I have to admit," she began, her tone gentle, "I didn't understand at first. But seeing you all together tonight, well, it's clear that you're a family, and I think it's a beautiful thing." John felt a wave of relief wash over him. He smiled, nodding respectfully. "Thank you, Mrs. Dawson. That means a lot." As the guests left that night, John realized that, while they couldn't change everyone's opinion, they could change how they approached the world. Together, they would face each challenge, each judgment, with love and resilience. In the quiet that followed the gathering, as they put the children to bed and tidied up, John looked around at the home they had created together. This place, filled with warmth, laughter, and the steady rhythm of family, was a testament to everything they had fought for. And as he pulled Anna into a gentle embrace, he knew that they could face anything the world threw at them, as long as they had each other. The seasons changed, bringing with them a sense of peace and stability to John, Anna, Leo, and Mia. What had begun as an uncertain journey had transformed into a life they each cherished, a tapestry of laughter, shared memories, and the unspoken bonds that held them together. For the first time, John felt truly content, his heart anchored by the love he had found in his new family. As the holidays approached, they decided to celebrate by spending a weekend at a cozy cabin in the mountains. They packed bags of warm clothes, snacks, and board games, Leo and Mia chattering excitedly about the possibility of snow. It would be their first winter holiday together, and John was determined to make it unforgettable. When they arrived at the cabin, nestled between tall pine trees dusted with snow, the children gasped with delight, their faces pressed to the windows. Inside, a fire crackled in the stone fireplace, casting a warm glow that enveloped the room. They settled in, hanging coats by the door and unpacking bags with the familiar ease of a family deeply attuned to each other's rhythms. That evening, as they sat around the fireplace, Leo and Mia asked John to tell them stories from his childhood. John felt a mix of nostalgia and vulnerability as he recounted tales of his own father, a man who had taught him to fish, to tie his shoes, and, perhaps most importantly, to believe in family. He spoke of his father's wisdom, the small lessons passed down over years of quiet understanding, and he realized, in a way, that he was honoring his father's legacy by sharing this love with Leo and Mia. As he finished his story, Mia crawled onto his lap, her small arms wrapping around his neck. "I'm glad you're our daddy," she whispered, her voice soft and filled with a love that melted the last remaining walls around his heart. John kissed her forehead, feeling the weight of her words settle over him, filling him with a deep gratitude. "I'm the luckiest man in the world to have you and Leo," he whispered back, his voice thick with emotion. The next morning, they woke to find the world blanketed in fresh snow. Leo and Mia squealed with excitement, racing outside to make snow angels and snowmen, their laughter filling the crisp morning air. John and Anna joined them. And soon a playful snowball fight broke out, the sounds of joy echoing through the quiet mountainside. As they paused to catch their breath, John looked at Anna, who was watching the children with a soft smile. He took her hand, pulling her close, their breath mingling in the cold air as he held her gaze. "I never thought my life would look like this," he said, his voice filled with wonder. "But I wouldn't change a thing." Anna smiled, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Neither would I. We've built something beautiful, John, something I never thought I'd have." They stood together, watching their children play, a profound sense of peace settling over them. This was their life now, a life woven together by love, resilience, and the quiet strength of a family that had overcome every challenge to be here. That night, as they sat around the fire one last time, Leo surprised everyone by pulling out a small, hand-drawn card from his backpack. He handed it to John, his face shy yet hopeful. "I made this for you, Daddy." John opened the card, his heart swelling as he took in the simple drawing of their family, himself, Anna, Leo, and Mia, all holding hands under a bright golden sun. Below it, Leo had written, "Thank you for being my dad. I love you." Tears pricked at John's eyes, and he pulled Leo into a tight hug, his voice choked with emotion. "I love you too, Leo, more than you'll ever know." Mia quickly joined the embrace, her small arms wrapping around them both, and Anna, with tears in her own eyes, held them all close. In that moment, they were a family, bound not by convention or blood, but by choice, by love, and by the shared journey that had led them here. As they sat there, huddled together in the warmth of their love, John realized that he had found the life he had always been searching for, a life full of meaning, filled with the kind of love that made every sacrifice, every struggle worth it. He was no longer just a man defined by his work or his solitude. He was a father, a partner, and most importantly, a man who had learned to love with his whole heart. And as he closed his eyes that night, he knew that this was only the beginning of a journey that would continue to bring them closer, to teach them the beauty of family, and to fill each day with a love that would never fade.